My name is Heather Frederick. I'm with the University of Arkansas, and I coordinate the W Dollar program with, or in partnership with the farmers markets in Northwest Arkansas. And so we, in the past, we've done cooking demonstrations at many of the farmers markets, but because of COVID, we have had to rethink how we do these cooking demonstrations. And so we're giving this a shot. I think it's gonna work really well once we get some kinks figured out. And I really appreciate all of you joining us. I think this is a good way to reach even more people than what we would have, had we had it in person. And we've designed these, hopefully by giving you all the ingredient list and the recipes that you can cook alongside Heather as she is going through her demonstration, or you could just sit and watch. It's completely up to you. I know many of you are enrolled in SNAP or the pandemic EBT, and if you are, by watching this or participating in this program, you get to earn extra W Dollar tokens at the market that you choose to shop at. So if you do participate in those programs, please send me a message in the chat box, a direct message in the chat box, or an email to me stating your name and the market that you that you shop at. I will, since it might be hard for you to see where the chat feature is in your Zoom screen. It's if you hover along the bottom, if you're on a desktop or a laptop, if you hover along the bottom, there'll be a chat, and I will. Usually if I type something in, everybody will see it. And you can, I'll type a message in here that you can reply to me with your market and if you participate in SNAP or the EBT programs. Okay, so our featured chef today is Heather Artripe. She is the Community Outreach Coordinator for Ozark Natural Foods. She may be familiar to a lot of you. She's been doing this kind of work for a very long time. She's got a lot of really good experience. And our topic today is cooking, cooking without turning the stove on. So Heather and I were talking before we started about how our homes are so hot, and it's, we try to avoid turning the stove on when we're preparing meals. And so this kind of fits right in here. One more person that I wanted to introduce is Jenny Vaughn, and you probably all received an email from Jenny. She's with UAMS, and she's helping out with the coordinator, the outreach coordination part of the program. Jenny, you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to get to be a part of this. I'm with UAMS, and I work with different growers and farmers markets to help, connect them to folks so that, everybody can have fresh fruit and vegetables and get excited about nutrition and cooking. So I'm happy to be a part of the program.
All right, thanks, Jenny.
Yeah.
Heather, do you want to go ahead and get started?
It's 2013, so for the past 7 years. A little bit about myself. I born and raised in this area, Springdale, Fayetteville. I have no official culinary training. My granny took care of me when I was younger, so when I was big enough, around 3, 4, to drag a chair across the kitchen floor, that's when I started cooking with her. The first thing I ever learned to make, we would make egg custards all week long, so I can make one of those with my eyes closed. And just really had a lot of inspiration from of course, my granny, my mom, my aunts. They always, let me be right there in the kitchen with them and cooking. And, looking back, it's probably the things I didn't want to do, but as a kid, I was like, this is so exciting. So really instilled the love of cooking in me. So I'm really glad to be here. It's, I was teaching classes all throughout the community before COVID hit, as well as at our old location. And so this is a new thing for me. So I'm just really excited. I'm not too technical, so I'm glad that we have got Heather and Jenny here to help me with that. And if y'all have any questions or anything throughout, of course, you can chat to them or we can save it to the end. I'm on my phone, so I can't really move around too much, but definitely we'll be here for questions, or, if we're going a little bit too fast, just say, hey, can we slow down, and we can for sure do that. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So I've got my stuff laid out. We'll just go over a few things in our ingredient list really quickly, just to make sure that we've got everything ready to go. And again, this recipe, what you got, of course you can follow it. It's my favorite version of it, but you can really take this, add different ingredients to it, add more ingredients, however you like. This is your recipe at the end of this, and so you make it your own. So we're going to start out with some chickpeas or garbanzo beans. I try to pick these because I am not a hummus fan. I know it's super weird. Everyone's like, you don't like hummus? I don't. So I'm like, I've got to eat chickpeas in a different way. So I like to make salads with them. You could use other types of beans if you like, whichever ones are your favorite. I used 2 cans of garbanzo beans in here. So if you buy it's either like 14.5 or 15 ounce cans, you're usually going to get about 1.5 cups of beans out of it. So if you are cooking your beans from scratch, you want to use 3 cups for this. So we've got those ready to go. We've got tomatoes. So you could either use cherry tomatoes or grape tomatoes. I'm going to use some beautiful slicers today. If you are not a tomato fan, red bell pepper works really nicely as a replacement. You get that color and you also get that nice sweetness. So there's another option for that. We are going to use cucumber. So we've got our cucumber here. You could also do zucchini or squash. I've added that in there, and it's really good. So those are all options. We've got our green bell pepper. And again, you could use any color you like. I like using the green in this because you start out, your green is going to be the less sweet, and then yellow and orange are in the middle, and then of course your red is the sweetest. So we're still getting that nice, bright, crispy crunch of the pepper without adding a lot more sweetness to it. And then next on our list, we've got some herbs. So any kind of herbs you like. I'm using some Italian or flat leaf parsley in here. And I'm also using some fresh basil leaves. Those are so predominant right now. I know I've seen them at the markets. I've got them growing like crazy out on my patio right now. And by adding 2 different herbs, because a lot of times the complaint about parsley is it doesn't have a lot of flavor. It's sort of a useless herb, I've heard people say. So parsley is actually the parent plant to a lot of our common herbs. So when you pair it with basil, or you pair it with dill, or you pair it with some other herbs, it really helps to sort of enhance that flavor. So it actually acts as sort of like a booster. And I'm a fan of the flat leaf over the curly. So we're going to use that. The optional ingredient, goat cheese or feta. If you're not a fan of either one of those, you can definitely leave it out. Parmesan is another alternative too, if you want a little bit of cheese in there. Give it some, nice sort of saltiness. So I'm going to use some White River Creamery Chev here. And they are set up at the Fayetteville market, and their cheese is really good. And then for our dressing, we're just going to do a pretty standard vinaigrette. So we've got some lemon juice or white wine vinegar, red wine vinegar. The only vinegar I don't recommend is like a white distilled, just because it's a little bit harsh. Apple cider vinegar, you can of course use that. Garlic, we're going to use fresh garlic. If you don't have fresh garlic or you don't want to chop it up, sometimes I'm like, I just don't really want to mince up garlic right now. What you would want to use is about 3/4 of a teaspoon of granulated garlic. So a good rule of thumb is about 1/4 of a teaspoon of garlic granules for every clove in a recipe. You can always add more to it. So if you taste it and you want to have a little bit more flavor, of course, add some more afterwards. Dijon mustard, we're adding that in there. it helps to emulsify our mixture. So Dijon is the best, stone ground is the second best, mustard, and then yellow mustard really doesn't help and it has a harsh flavor to it. So if you don't have either one of those, you can just leave it out. This is just going to help it make one cohesive mixture. And then salt and pepper, a little bit of sugar just to counteract our acidity, or you could do honey or, you know, whatever sweetener you like, you can definitely use just a tiny, tiny bit. And then olive oil is going to be our oil in here. So those are our ingredients, and we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing that I want to do or want us to do is go ahead and chop up our veggies that go in this. So I've got my cutting board here. One thing that I like to do is I put a dish towel underneath of mine or a paper towel, and that's going to help keep our cutting board from moving around. So now it's in one spot, we can chop, we don't have to worry about it scooching all over the place. The knife that I'm going to be using is what is called a chef's knife. This is just your perfect all-purpose kitchen knife. So the easiest way to hold it is to actually put your middle finger underneath of the neck. So this part right here, and then these two fingers go on top. So that way you have more control of the blade. And if you're not used to doing it like that, maybe try it out after the class, you know, whatever you're comfortable with today. Because it did take me a little bit to get used to this. But once you do, it makes chopping so much easier. You have control over the blade, and you don't have to worry as much about cutting any fingers off, which we do not want to do. All right, so let's get started. We're just going to go down our list here. So I've got a bowl. I usually start with a little bit bigger bowl than I think that I'm gonna need, just so we've got plenty of room to mix it around. So we've got our bowl here. Does everyone have a bowl ready to put their stuff in? One thing that I like to do with these classes to make it a little bit easier is to give the thumbs up since we're on mute. So as we're going through, if you know we get done with an ingredient and we're like, is everyone ready to move on? We can do the thumbs up, then we know it's good to go. All right, so everyone have a bowl? All right, perfect. And Heather, if you wouldn't mind, because you're actually on my screen, if you would just nod for me if you see other people doing the thumbs up. Perfect, sounds great. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and add our chickpeas into our bowl. So I rinse these really well, and like I said, I just used the canned ones. And these work nicely. They don't have a lot of flavor to them, so they're really gonna take on our other flavors. And this dish is perfect after 30 minutes, and honestly, it's even better the next day. So I'll usually make this like on Sunday, and then I'll eat on it for a few days during the week. Okay, so we've got our chickpeas here in our bowl. I'm gonna set that over to the side there, and I'm gonna grab our tomatoes. So I washed all these ahead of time. I'm just going to take that little stem off there, and that one. All right, so we're going to dice these up. If you're using cherry or grape tomatoes, you can just cut those straight in half. If they're a little bit on the larger side, you might want to go ahead and quarter those. But the easiest way, in my opinion, to do it is we're going to sort of, it's a little bit harder to do the claw on the tomatoes, but sort of do this motion when you're holding your veggies, and that's going to tuck your fingertips back under. So when you're cutting, the knife will actually hit your knuckle before it hits your fingers, and then that way it sort of safeguards your hand. But we're going to cut off the top part, and then I like to do a little incision, and then that way I can cut straight through. We're just going to make some nice slices here. Perfect. And to be honest, one of my favorite parts about cooking, especially if I'm just cooking for myself or my partner or my mom, because that's what I've been cooking for since COVID hit, I will take like the bottom part of the tomato, the top part, I put salt on it, I eat it. So I just took our slices and made 3 long slices, and then we're gonna go through, depending on the size of your tomato, and cut either 3 across the other way or 4. So now we've got all of our beautiful diced tomatoes. I'm going to set these aside because I will for sure eat those. I think since tomatoes came in season, I've ate at least 1, if not more, tomatoes every day. All right, we're going to do the same with the other one. Perfect. And then if you've got a piece of tomato that still has this part in it that's a little bit hard, you can just take your knife, of course, and just cut that right on out of there. All right, put that over in our compost bowl. Last tomato here. Perfect. So one thing that I want to do before we get this added in is we want to take a little bit of salt and just go over our tomatoes. That's really going to help entice and bring out that tomato flavor. And so we'll just sprinkle it over there, just a pinch, about 1/8 of a teaspoon. And then we're going to take and add these right in. So the chickpeas that I bought didn't have any salt added to them. So I prefer to get them like that. So that way, when you get your end product, you don't have to worry about it being too salty. And of course, if you cook them from scratch, you know, you control the seasoning that way. But if you can, try to get some beans that don't have any salt added into them. All right, so I'm gonna clean off some of this liquid that came out from our tomatoes. So we have a nice dry cutting board. Perfect. Are we good on our tomatoes? Dicing those up? All right, we'll wait. Oh, cool. We'll wait just a little bit longer. If you're done with your tomatoes, go ahead and just start mixing everything up. So after every ingredient we add in, we're going to go ahead and give it a good mix, because while we are making this, even though it's not a dish to make, it doesn't take that long, we want to let those flavors start infusing. So by mixing this in, our tomatoes can go ahead and start coating our chickpeas and so forth when we add everything in. All right, beautiful. Set that there. I'm going to set my tomatoes in this bowl. All right. Are we good to move on to our next one? Okay, perfect. Okay, so our next thing on our list here is our cucumber. So I'm using a longer cucumber. If you have the small pickling ones, I like to get those when I'm at the market because I like to eat on them as well. You can take, I would probably do 2 to 3 of the smaller pickling cucumbers for one large one. So what I want to do is just cut both of the ends off. I don't peel mine because I like that nice crunch you get from the skin. And these local ones have such a thin skin that it's not going to be too hard to eat. But if you would rather peel yours, you can for sure do that. But what I do want to do is cut this in half. So now we've got 2 pieces. And then we're going to take and cut right down the middle so that the seeds are exposed on both sides here. And then I'm just going to grab just a regular spoon. So the seeds is really what has the most water in our cucumbers. So they're essentially all water with some flavor in there. So they're very watery. So what we want to do if we're making a salad or we're making something that we're going to have for a few days is we want to take and scrape these seeds out. You can take them, if you've got like a water infuser, put that in there with some lemon, maybe your lemon that you have left over from your dressing for this, and make lemon cucumber water. It's really good. But you just want to take your spoon and just go down all of those seeds. And I do the same thing for zucchini and yellow squash, because again, that's where a lot of that water lives in those. So we're just going to scrape that right in there. All right. This is also a really great salad to make, like if you have roasted or grilled some other veggies like grilled squash or zucchini, say like the night before, and then you make this, just throw those in there. It adds such a wonderful flavor. Alrighty, so once we get all of the seeds out, I like to take and lay it with the inside part down. So then we end up with 2 pieces this way. And if they're a little bit bigger, I'll usually go ahead and cut them into 4s. So we really want everything in this dish to be about the same size. So we really don't want, anything bigger than our tomatoes or our chickpeas. So we're trying to make them all about that size. And then we want to line them up. Here, we're going to hold on to this other end with our claw and then just cut straight down. Perfect. So we're going to do that with the rest of our cucumbers. One thing I grew up on, we always had in my family, well, we would always have a mason jar of green onions in the middle of the table for meals, which as a kid, I was like, this is so weird, but it was not. It's wonderful. And we would always have cucumber slices with lemon pepper seasoning on them, which I love. And that's such a big part of, when I think about food in my childhood, is that. So if you are a fan of lemon pepper on cucumbers, you could sprinkle a little bit of that on them before you put them in there, like we did with our salt and the tomatoes, and that would just add another depth of flavor. So if we add some flavoring as we go, by the end of it, it's going to be layer upon layer, and it's just going to taste so good. Which sometimes you can think about that and think, oh, well, it might be too much, but it actually usually comes out just perfect. Right.
Your granny sounds like a great cook, Heather.
Oh, she was wonderful. And my mom is too, so.
Yeah.
And my aunt and cousins. But I'm 33, and I still my mom lives in Springdale, and I'll be like, hey, can I come over? Will you make this? Or she makes like pork chops and asparagus and rice, and I think I could eat that every day. I actually requested that for tomorrow, so I'm really excited to go and have that. All righty, so we've got the rest of our cucumbers. And this thing that I'm using, so this is actually a bench scraper. You use it a lot with baking. So if you're doing bread, you use it to help move it around. If you have one of these, it works perfect for if you're chopping up veggies to scoop them all up and put them in something. Because your knife, every time the blade hits the board, it's going to dull it just a little bit. So by using something else to scrape it up, keeps your blade a little bit sharper. All righty, we're going to mix those cucumbers in. Perfect. And then there's actually, speaking of blades, there is a local guy named Tyler, and he has a business called Honed In, and he is a knife sharpener. I believe he sets up at the Fayetteville Farmers Market, or just on his own. But if you're needing to get your knife sharpened, I highly recommend him. He's wonderful. All right, so are we good on our cucumbers?
We've got one question here.
Okay.
From Linda. You'll have to unmute yourself again. Linda, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, is this the sound quality? I'm having to hold the phone to my ear and watch her at the same time. Is this a Mediterranean, Middle Eastern type salad that can be served with what meat in particular, lamb or goat?
Oh yeah, for sure. So a lot of your Mediterranean dishes are going to have a lot of veggies in them. So your cucumbers and your tomatoes, your fresh herbs, lemon, feta. So yeah, it would go perfect with that as well as chicken. So that's a really great pairing. The other herb that I wanted to mention too that's really nice if you wanted to go for more of a Mediterranean vibe is you could add some fresh mint into here. And that also is really, really good. So yeah, great question. All right, are we ready to move on to our bell pepper? Okay, perfect. So we've got our bell pepper here. So what I want to do is the first thing to cutting our bell pepper is we're going to cut the bottom part off. And y'all know I eat these too. It's going right there with my tomatoes. And then what I like to do is now we've got a pretty flat surface and it's not going to roll around on us, is we're going to take and cut one side off and go around. And you're going to be able to cut 3 with it standing up. When you get to your last side, lay it down on its side and just cut right through there. So now we've got all of our core pieces here. I'm going to take that bottom part off because I'm going to eat that too. And then that way we don't have seeds going everywhere.
Heather, could you use something like an Italian pepper as well? I've seen some of those at the market.
Any kind of peppers you want. I do suggest doing maybe one that's a little bit sweeter, but if you wanted to add some heat, you can definitely add in an extra pepper to this. Oh yeah, I love Italian peppers. All right, put those in there. And then what I want to do is we've got these white part here, the pith part, and the hot peppers, that's the part, of course, the seeds and the pith are going to be the hottest part. So these are sweet peppers, so it's not going to be hot, but it does have a little bit different of a texture. It's not that nice crunch that we like. So what I like to do is I cut around them, and then I turn it over on the side, and I'll do that one more time, and just cut that out of there. So we'll cut on both sides. Then we'll lay this over. So this is our piece that's attached here. Lay it on its side and just cut down where that's off of there. And this dish too, as a side dish, like what we are making exactly today, should do about 4 servings. You can definitely double this if you're wanting to make a big batch. You could add more veggies to it. So you could do some zucchini and squash, or whatever you like, some onion added in here, and maybe just double up the dressing, and you'll make a really nice big dish. And then what I want to do now is we're just going to line up a few of our pepper slices, and we're just going to dice those right on up. And I usually do about 3 or 4 at a time, just so you're not working with so many that, they start going all over the place. I'll just scooch those over. All right, just a couple more left on our pepper here.
No, she's cutting pepper.
Perfect. All right. peppers in. Give that a stir. And already this just looks so great.
Looks delicious.
Thank you. I heard my tummy rumble a little bit, so I'm glad we're doing this because I'm going to definitely
It
be
looks so
eating.
fresh and colorful and delicious. It would go so well with goat or lamb.
Oh yeah, definitely. Was there another question that came across there?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. All right. Has everyone got their, are we still working on our peppers?
Heather, there was one comment, maybe you have some tips, you know, getting everything to all your different vegetables, having them chopped the same size and all, you know, looking so nice. And, you know, there was a comment about someone, you know, has a hard time, you know, getting everything that, like that nice uniform size. And I can relate to that too. I don't know if you have any tips or, you know, anything to help with that.
Yeah, for sure. So like the old saying goes, practice makes perfect. I definitely, you know, remember, you know, with, you know, doing that and just being like so frustrated because everything was sort of all different sizes and, you know, I all wanted it to look nice. So my suggestion and my tips for that is when you go to the market and get your veggies, if you make a dish like this, or maybe have a few in rotation that does require chopping, and just make sure you have enough time, and just, you know, sit there and like, you know, do your chops. YouTube has great tutorials on how to do all the different kind of chopping. So you could watch a few of those. For me, like chopping and dicing up veggies for a dish is very soothing, and it's something that I use sort of as a meditation. So I like to make sure that I have enough time, which I know can be hard, you know, with families and work and life and everything. But if you can just sort of carve out some time for yourself and, you know, go ahead and work on your chopping and your slicing, you know, that's really the best way to do it. So after doing it, you know, over and over, it just sort of becomes a little bit second nature. And for sure, if anyone is interested in that more, you know, let Heather know, and I'd be happy to email y'all some links or, you know, some suggestions and stuff like that for sure.
Yeah, that'd be great, Heather. Thanks.
Awesome. Perfect. But yeah, I totally can relate to that. And julienning veggies, still to this day, I'm just like, but you know, just get some carrots and that's what I do, and just stand over here and chop them, and then you've got them chopped up and you can use them all throughout the week in different dishes. So if you had, you know, your veggies chopped ahead of time, then this dish would come together, you know, probably in like 10 minutes. So, you know, you get to practice and then you get to eat it. So it's even better for me. That's a great thing about food. It's art that you get to eat. So that's one of the reasons why I love it. And they're perfectly imperfect is how I like to look at your chopping of your veggies. You know, what you see on YouTube or on TV, you know, it's beautiful, but in reality, they're not always going to look like that. So perfectly imperfect is how I like to think of it. They're all about the same size. That's good to go. All right, are we ready to move on to our herbs?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm using parsley and basil. Again, mint is another great thing to add in here. Dill would also be really nice. I'm using fresh herbs. If you have dried herbs, you can definitely use that. If you've got an Italian herb mix, that would be a nice one to put in here, or a Greek one. I would probably go with about 2 to 3 teaspoons of your dried herbs, and then taste it and add a little bit more. So your dried herbs are going to be more potent and have a lot more flavor to them than your fresh ones will. So you don't have to use as much. But I've made this dish when I didn't have any fresh herbs on me, or I grow them here at our apartment. But sometimes I use too many and then I'm waiting for them to regrow. So your Italian seasoning, your Greek seasoning, those are perfect to add into this. All right, we're gonna take some fresh parsley. Now I'm gonna take and cut these end pieces off here. If you juice or do anything like that, you can throw those stems in there and they're perfect. So now what I wanna do is I'm gonna take and sort of bunch up our herbs so they're really tight like this. And then I'm going to bend them over. We're gonna sort of have this weird like ball shape of herbs. And I actually learned this from Jamie Oliver. He's a great person to watch on YouTube as far as learning, you know, cutting and stuff like that. I just really like him too. So he's actually the one I learned this from, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. So now we've got our like big compact ball of parsley here. We've got our fingers tucked down here, holding on to it. We're gonna take our knife and just cut straight down like we were cutting slices. And at this point, everything is gonna sort of balloon out, and that's fine because we got that initial cut. So the thing about your herbs is we wanna mince them up, we wanna dice them up, but we don't wanna necessarily bruise them. So by doing that, we get that initial first nice cut throughout. And then what you wanna do is gather them all up in, you know, one sort of circle, abstract circle. You're gonna take your knife and you're gonna hold it, of course, with your hand that you cut with. Your other hand, you wanna put on top. You wanna make sure you give yourself some space because you don't wanna be so close to the edge down here that as you're chopping, that could go into your hand. So I usually like to do mine about right here, if y'all can see that. And then what we wanna do is we're gonna cut in what I call a half moon shape. So by doing that, our knife never comes completely off of the board. And you're gonna get a nice mince quicker than if we were cutting just with one hand here. So after you go through once, gather them all back together, just go over again. And I say go over, you know, 3 to 4 times if you've got some really big ones. These were pretty small, so I think we should be good. Oh, I love fresh parsley so much. Okay, so here, that's a little bit bigger piece, we'll take that out. But we've got some nice small pieces here. I'm gonna take these, gather them all up, and they're gonna go over here in our bowl. And one thing too, and you can start noticing it as you're chopping your herbs, is when you get done, you shouldn't have, like if you've got a little bit of a wet spot here because of washing the herbs, but you shouldn't have green. If you've got green on your board, that means they bruised a little bit. They'll still be fine, but a lot of those good flavors have already sort of been stripped out of there. So that's a fun thing to sort of watch for. I noticed with myself, that's when I was like, okay, cool. Now I'm chopping herbs, you know, like I should. So just keep an eye out for that. Pull that off of there. The next thing that we're gonna do is our basil. So these are a little bit smaller leaves. I worked with some local ones earlier this week that were massive. I always get so jealous because growing them in a pot, you know, they get about this size, which they're delicious, but there's just something about those giant basil leaves where you're just like, oh, this is beautiful. All right, so I'm gonna take a few here, stack them up on top of each other. I also like to do this with mint because these are pretty fragile and they can bruise quite easily. And we're gonna take and roll these up. And this is what's called chiffonade. So if you see a recipe and it says chiffonade basil, this is what they mean. Roll it up And then you're gonna take, just like we did with our ball of parsley, and cut straight down. So now we have these nice long-ish pieces of basil. We don't have any bruising on them, and we're going to get some great flavor out of that. So you want to start with the ones that are all about the same size. We'll add that there. Perfect. We'll do a few more. And I usually try to keep, you know, one of these sort of smaller ones that has all the pieces to it left there, and then I put that on top. That's totally optional. I like to do it. My mom, when she would make potato salad, or when she still makes potato salad, she would always leave a little bit of the fresh dill and put on top, and I just thought that was so pretty. So that's sort of my sort of ode to my mom and her cooking and what I've learned from her. All right, and we want to take and just sort of sprinkle these up and down, and that releases them from the other ones that were cut alongside. All right, so we want to take and mix this together. Beautiful. So we've got our salad here. We've got everything in it except for our goat cheese or our feta or Parmesan. So we're going to wait until the very end for that. So the last thing that we have to do for ours is make our dressing. Is everyone good to go on making our dressing?
I think so. Heather, one question. There was a comment that says, so this person's mom can't eat cucumbers. So she's put in green beans chopped. What other vegetables without seeds would be good? You mentioned something about zucchini earlier. Are there some other vegetables that might work well in here?
Let me see. So of course asparagus is more of a spring vegetable, but asparagus is really delicious in something like this.
What about some sweet corn?
Corn, yes, corn.
Corn,
perfect in
cut
here.
off the cob.
Yeah, and you can just take those, stand them up, and cut them straight down. Onion, the candied onions that are at the market are really wonderful and sweet. Those are nice to mince up in here. But yeah, I'm trying to think. If you wanted to, honestly, I've made this too and diced up some lettuce and added diced lettuce into it. So if you've got some lettuce you want to use up, you can do that. Radishes, really whatever veggie you like will work perfectly in here.
I like the idea of, like, if you're making some, you know, roasted vegetables at, you know, earlier in the week and have some, you can just throw them in. I like that combination of like having something cooked along with something raw, and
Yes.
adds nice, you know, varying textures.
Yes, and then you don't have to worry about, like, if you had roasted or grilled zucchini or squash, you don't have to worry about it making everything else watery. So that's what I like. That's what I do, honestly. I love zucchini and squash.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions before we make our dressing?
I don't think so.
All right. So we're going to get our dressing ingredients here. We've got our olive oil. Make sure this isn't in the way. We've got our Dijon stone ground mustard. Again, you don't have to have it in there, just something to sort of help emulsify it. We've got our fresh garlic. We've got salt and pepper. So the first thing that I want to do is we've got our bowl. I'm using a small glass one here so y'all can see. And it doesn't have like the gripper on the bottom. I know some bowls have like some silicone or something down here so they don't move around. But you can just put it on a towel, because if we are whisking this with one hand constantly and doing our dressing, we want to make sure our bowl isn't wobbling everywhere. So I'm going to set it there on my towel. But before we get started, we're going to do our garlic. Again, I'm using 3 cloves of fresh garlic, but you could definitely do 3/4 a teaspoon of your garlic granules. If you have garlic powder, I would maybe start with 1/2 of a teaspoon. It's a little bit finer of a cut. And then, so you're gonna get more out of 3/4 of a teaspoon. So just start with about a 1/2 teaspoon of the garlic granules or the garlic powder, and then 3/4 of a teaspoon of garlic granules. So the best way to do our garlic is we're gonna take our clove here, we're gonna take our knife, we're gonna press down, and that's gonna break that paper. So we'll break that, and then you should be able to peel those right out of there. I know I've seen the videos where people put them in like a glass mason jar and shake them. And to be honest, I've tried that a couple of times, and one time it ended up in the living room floor because I got too much into my shaking. So I prefer just to do it this way. All right, and then I'm gonna cut these little end pieces off here. Just because those can be a little bit tough and a little bit unpleasant. All right, so with our garlic, I'm gonna just give it a rough chop all the way across. Like so. So now we end up with some larger pieces here. We're gonna do the same thing that we did with our herbs, where we gather them all up in our circle, and we're gonna do the 1/2 moon cut without picking our knife up off the cutting board. You can sort of drag those back. And I like mine to be, you know, pretty small, but it doesn't have to be super, super tiny. I think one more go here. Perfect. All right, so we're gonna gather that up. I'm gonna set that to the side. We're gonna add everything into our bowl for our dressing, except for our olive oil first. If you are comfortable whisking with your garlic in here, you can for sure do that. But if you're just starting out doing our emulsions, I recommend keeping it separate, and we can add that in at the end. So I'm gonna use a lemon here. I like to roll mine a few times on the cutting board like this. That sort of helps release the juice from the membranes. We're gonna cut that right in half. And we want 2 tablespoons of lemon juice or vinegar, just something acidic. One thing that I will add into this sometime is like jarred pepperoncinis or like a pickled pepper type thing. And you can actually add a little bit of that juice into here, and that tastes really good. And that's nice and acidic as well.
I really love the versatility of this recipe.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of recipes that are so like, you have to do it just like this, because not everyone likes everything that's in it. And, you know, it's your thing. It should totally represent you and what you like and what you have on hand. And usually, you know, at the market, a lot of the times, my mom and I will get a basket of zucchini and share it because it's just her, and here at my house, it's just me and my partner. But if you end up with like 1 zucchini or, you know, 1 cucumber or 1 this or that, this is a great dish to make because you can just put them all in there. All right, so we've got our 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I'm going to do 1 tablespoon of Dijon. It might help if I took the paper off of it inside. And if you're not a fan of mustard, or you really don't want to have that like Dijon flavor in it, honestly, all you need in a vinaigrette to really help emulsify it is 1 teaspoon. So you could cut this down to a teaspoon. All right. All right, like so. Next thing that we're going to add in is we're going to do some salt. I'm actually going to take this over here, or I'll have mustard all over me. So about 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And I'm using kosher salt, so it's a little bit bigger as far as the granules go. You can see that there. If you're using table salt, I would start out with about 1/2 teaspoon because it's really fine and we don't want it to be too salty. So if you're using table salt, go ahead and start with 1/2 teaspoon. You can always add more in. A little bit of fresh ground pepper or black pepper. I usually add in a little bit extra. I am a big fan of pepper. All right. And then we're going to do just a pinch of salt, or I'm sorry, just a pinch of sugar. So about that much, about 1/8 teaspoon. All right, let's give this a nice whisk. Let's see here. All right, we've got everything in here except for our garlic and our olive oil. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out our oil. So you want 1/4 cup. It's not going to make a huge vinaigrette, but we really don't want a huge vinaigrette on this. We really just want enough to sort of coat all of our veggies and really make everything flavorful without it setting in there. Okay, so I'm going to take our oil in my non-dominant hand. This is just like if you've ever made a pudding or something like that where you've got to temper the eggs in. You're going to be whisking with one hand. Get a nice little arm workout doing it. So whisk with one hand. You're going to start out with just a couple of drops to get started. And then we're just going to slowly stream in the rest. If you were to just take all of your olive oil and dump it right in, it's going to be really hard to get it to all blend together. It'll be separate. You'll have your oil and then you'll have everything else. So this way, everything all comes together in one cohesive dressing. And if you ever, like if you need to stop or your arm gets tired or whatever, just go ahead, stop pouring that in there, stir a little bit more. And then when you start back up, start out just like you were starting over and just do a couple of drops. And then slowly stream that in there. If you've got like a favorite bottled vinaigrette, you can also use that in here too. And that's a nice quick way to make this as well. All right, we've got that all in there. Stir it a little bit more. You can see here we've got our nice thick mixture. I'm gonna grab a spoon, we'll do a quick taste test. Needs a little bit more sugar, just a pinch. And this part's really important to do before you mix it in, because now you can tell if it's too acidic or, you know, it's too sweet or too salty. At this point, you can fix it. If you mix it in with everything else, at that point, it's going to be a lot harder to fix it and have everything cohesive. So this is really good. We're going to add in our garlic. And I'm going to bring our salad back. We're going to pour this all over. Make sure you get all of that out of there. That was another thing I learned from my granny, was not to waste anything. And then we just want to spin this around a few times, get that all mixed together. And you want to let this set for about 30 minutes, which is going to be hard for me because I'm ready to dig in, just so those flavors have enough time to all come together. So I would say give it about 30 minutes. At that point, taste it. If you want to add in, I know I want to because I always do, add in a little bit more black pepper. I would hold off on adding more salt. If you're using goat cheese or feta, those tend to be quite salty. And so I would taste it with that. And then if you want a little bit more salt, you can add that. All right. And another thing that I like to do if I'm making this, say for my lunch all week, is I will leave the goat cheese separate and I will just add it in like the day that I'm eating it. For me, I love goat cheese. I could eat it every day, but it tends to overpower things sometimes. So that's why I like to keep it separate until I'm getting ready to eat it. But I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit in.
Hey, Heather, a question. Oh, there was a question. So it was vinegar or lemon juice, right? Not both?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Either one.
Gotcha.
They both work just as well. The only vinegar I do not recommend is white distilled vinegar because it's very harsh. But any of your other vinegars work perfect.
Okay. We are obviously Heather's getting to the end of her recipe, and some people probably need to leave because it's 12 o'clock. But Jenny, can you remind us when the next class is? We have 2 more of these cooking demonstrations, maybe 3.
So the other ones are the third Saturday of the month. So I believe that's August 15th and September 19th. Let me double check that.
15th is correct. Yes.
And so the next one, we'll have a chef. She'll be coming to us from Brightwater. She's a student at Brightwater, so she'll be leading that class. So definitely everyone be on the lookout. We'll advertise on social media again and sign up. And if you can't make that one, then we'll have another one in September as well.
Here is what my finished dish looks like. So I'm going to be very patient and let it set for 30 minutes before I dig in. Just a couple more things before I go. I thank you all so much for joining us today. I had a wonderful time. I hope you enjoyed it and enjoyed the recipe when you eat it. And again, I'll get with Heather and we will get I'll get some of those links sent out to some chopping and different videos that I think would be really good as far as, you know, getting those basics down as far as that goes.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much, Heather. This was
Yeah,
such a really wonderful recipe. It's so perfect for the season. You don't have to heat up your house or your home for this one. It, you know, focuses on local flavors, local foods. I really love the versatility of this recipe.
Yes.
And thank you all for joining us.